Hey everybody, I want to show you the auto feeder that I made out of a Phosban reactor. And this is the Phosban reactor here. I did nothing to the bottom. The only changes have been up to the top, and they're really kind of easy and cosmetic. This line here is where the water doses into the tank. And this line here is the emergency overflow. So if this line gets blocked, because I'm feeding a lot of food, there's a hole right there, then the water level will rise and the water will flow into this elbow and will flow into the emergency overflow. I used to keep this up more, but I end up, when I add the food, it kind of clogs that up. And that just hangs onto your tank. And I did one modification to the lid, which I think is really important for functionality. I took the lid and I cut the lid off. I cut the middle of it off and put a jar, this is a peanut butter jar, in there and cut the bottom out. And what that does for me is two things. Number one, it extends the amount of area of height that the water can get to if there's a problem. So if there's a blockage in either of the exit lines, the water goes up higher, and hopefully that pressure will help clear one of the lines. The other thing that it really does is it makes it easy to dump food in. So all I have to do is walk up to the thing and drop food into the top, and it goes in and it mixes. And I'll show you where it's set up. As you can see, if you just had the lid on, you'd have to take the lid off, put the food in, and put the lid back on. But I'm lazy. If you have to take something apart to use it, I'm less likely to use it. So now I've got this jar on the top, and I can dump food in to my heart's content, and it goes into there, and it doesn't spill anywhere, and I don't have to take anything apart. When it's running, there's an air line that goes down to the bottom to keep the food mixed. And this is the line I made to add water to the unit. So this attaches to a hose. I'll show you in a second when we set it up. And the water just comes up and over, drops in here. Everything gets mixed, the food and the new water coming in. It gets mixed by the air moving around pretty vigorously, and then it drips out the feeding tube. I'm using this because I'm really into, lately, not buying stuff. So if you're like me, you've got a whole bunch of stuff laying around that you've collected over the years from your reef keeping. And I want to use that stuff rather than keep buying new stuff. So I just had an old turkey baster. It was a reef baster, a thin one, and I heated it up and I made a hook for it. The other thing that this does for me is it allows me to visualize the flow. So I'm using a gate valve to adjust the flow, but it's really, really nice for me to be able to see the water dripping out. And then I know it's dripping at a slow rate, so it's feeding slowly. If I want to flush the whole container, I turn it up, and then I see a solid stream come through, and it clears it out. So I'm sorry, I didn't even talk about the basics about what this thing is. I want to dose food for my NPS corals and my regular corals, but I want it to be dosing over time, so it's more like plankton. And the problem is, there are ways to do it. I don't want to set up a refrigerator where a peristaltic pump is pumping through some food and then into the tank. I don't want to chill this. I just don't want a huge pain in the butt that I'm going to have to take care of too often. So I made this, and I can drop, and it clears within, depending on the settings. If I drop food in there, it starts to run clear somewhere between half an hour and 3 hours, depending on what I want. And that's pretty good long time for there be food in the water column. And the food goes in and it gets bubbled and it's constantly mixed. Nothing settles ever. It just stays in suspension until it feeds out. After about 4 hours, I think it starts to degrade too much and I don't want to use it anymore. So I don't let it set longer. But if I did, I could slow the drip rate even further down, and I could drop ice in here, and it would help keep it cold the whole time. If you do that, either put the ice in a Ziploc, or if you have a very cold refrigerator, which you don't at home, you could freeze it. You could freeze salt water, or you could just use like distilled water or RO water and you freeze that up and you drop it in there, and then you could have it dosing, over hours and hours, even a day, because it should take about that long for it to warm up once you've dropped ice in there. You'll have to play with it yourself. So that's 4 or 5 minutes talking about the device itself. I'm gonna go set it up and then we'll film it and we'll put some food in. So here's the back of my tank, and you can see that the device is filling up. You can see the water dripping through here. Well, it's pouring because I'm filling it up as fast as I can. And you can see here I've got the feed line is connected here with a piece of rubber tubing. That allows me to cinch this down and take it apart very easily, easier than the speed fittings are. There's a valve here in case I want to adjust it more. Here's the gate valve that I do the main adjustment, and here's the main valve that I can shut the whole thing off for. And this is the air line. You can see it's clear at the tip, and the air line just drops in the whole thing, just straight in. And there you go. Bob's your uncle, or happy as Larry. So that's a whole lot of bubbling. Usually I want the airline to be angled towards the tank so it's bubbling right in front of the outflow. And what that does for me is if I pour dry food in there, it tends to stay at the top for a little bit and it can go straight out the delivery tube. But if the bubbles are bubbling right near it, it churns the water and it makes the food go into solution. And I've used all kinds of food for this thing. I've used any of your frozen foods, eucalyptus, or nothing big. I haven't used anything like mysids yet. But anything small, I've used all the dry foods in the world, TDO, Reef, whatever you want. And here I'm gonna put a spoonful of something in, and you can see how it mixes up really quick. And of course it's filling very quickly right now, but that's how fast it mixes, so that's really great. And then when it hits the height that it needs to, it will start overflowing to the tank. Now I'm going to adjust it real quick, and you can see that changing right there, right? You can see that line, and I'm going to make it drip. I'm using the gate valve for this. Gate valves are great for that. And I can leave it at that, and that'll take an hour or two for it to, all of this to be fed. Maybe an hour. And then if we go around the front of the tank, right there is where the effluent comes out and feeds the tank. I've got this in a high output area. There's a wave pump right here that comes on and off. It's off right now because I was doing some other maintenance, but it'll blow the food all throughout the tank and it distributes very nicely. Let's see if you can actually see it dripping in. Yeah, you should be able to. Let me get closer up there. That's where it's dripping in. If you look carefully, you can see the clouds of the dry food being dispersed. So that's how that works, guys and gals and people of non-binariness. Auto feeder. It's good for all of these corals. What I'll do is I'll put a dash of the food in before the tank, before I fill up the auto feeder, so it primes all these corals to open up to start to feed, and then I'll add the food and go to town. All right, got any questions? Let me know. Hope it's helpful. Hey, just one more thing I noticed when I was back here that I forgot to mention as I was adjusting the drip line. I also use this device to dose these two things, or whatever, iodine and iron concentrate, because I can, if there's no food in here, I'll just dump the amount in there and then it doses slowly over time into my tank. Sure, you can put that kind of stuff, any of your additives, straight into the tank in a high flow area, but that this drips in at whatever speed I set it to drip in, I know that I'm not hitting any corals in the face with a big bunch of any kind of additive. So there you go. There you go.